Bats are some of the most amazing creatures on the planet. They are incredibly numerous and incredibly diverse. Among mammals, they are second only to rodents in total diversity. And yet, people often are afraid of bats or hate bats for reasons that have no rational basis. They think if bats are going to fly into their hair or do something wicked to them. Many bats are highly beneficial. A flock of bats like this might consume thousands of tons of insects in a single night. Bats are often associated with dark figures in our culture, from Batman to vampires to many other types of things that are considered evil. For some people, bats are truly frightening, especially because many have very strikingly weird-looking faces that have actual functional significance that are usually not appreciated. Yet bats come in many shapes and sizes, and they're incredibly complicated in their functional morphology and in many other features. Traditionally, bats have been classified into two major groups: the Megachiroptera, or large bats, the fruit bats and their relatives, which live on fruits and flowers, and the Microchiroptera, or insect-eating bats, which live on insects and use echolocation. Bats are the most diverse group of mammals on the planet after the rodents, with 18 families, 186 genera, over 1,400 species, so they make up about 20% of the mammalia all by themselves. For a body form that's highly constrained by the need to have wings and fly, they have lots of variations in their noses, their tails, and many other features that make bats very distinctive and very diverse. Some parts of the bat skeleton are relatively primitive, but all of them have arms and hands which are extremely specialized to be used as wings in flight. They enlarge their arm bones and especially lengthen all their finger bones of their hand, so they produce a giant membrane that is supported entirely by extremely stretched out fingers. Their thumb is still free to hang on to perches, but the first, second, third fingers are extremely modified and very long and support their wing membrane. Birds and bats may look superficially similar, but their wings fly in very different ways. The bird has a very stiff airfoil, while the bat's wing is entirely flexible, made entirely of a hand with the membranes connecting all the fingers, and they are capable of doing lots of things with their hands. The muscles inside the skin of the bat membrane are very important in their flight. They can do various things with them that no bird can do with its feathers. In particular, they are known to use the muscles to either clench or relax certain parts of the wing membrane. This allows the membrane to be either stiff when it's needed or flexible when it's needed, and allows them to have much more delicate and much more complicated movements in their flight, which no bird can do with just feather shafts supporting their wings. Bats are incredibly maneuverable as they fly, able to turn very sharp corners and dodge very tight things, and some of them can even hover as they feed on flowers and nectar. Recent research has shown a lot more about how bat flight works. By putting bats into wind tunnels and putting markers on them that allows digital sensing where their muscles and their wings go, we can document in detail how they fly and match them up to aerodynamic models that are done on computers that are used for understanding how airplanes and other vehicles fly. So a lot more is known about bat flight than used to be known. As we said before, the conventional breakdown of bats is into microbats and megabats. Microbats are insect eaters that focus on echolocation and track down their prey, while megabats feed on fruit. Echolocation is again one of the marvels of how bats are built. They let out a whole series of high-pitched squeaks, which come back to them as echoes off a prey item or some kind of obstacle, and allows them to figure out a number of things like the size, the texture, the distance, and the maneuverability of the object that they're trying to track. They also communicate with each other through their high-pitched squeaks. When they let out a series of high-pitched squeaks, the frequencies are extremely high, something in the order of 11 kilohertz to 212 kilohertz, of which most of it is in the lower end of that range, up to about 60 kilohertz. All of it is well above the range of human hearing. Using a bat detector, we can listen to their sounds.
Examples.
Megachiroptera, or fruit bats, or flying foxes are quite different. They have no echolocation, but instead use their excellent sense of smell to detect food. Some of them are very mega, much bigger than most of the other kinds of bats, and you can see why they're called flying foxes for this appearance. Perhaps the strangest of all is Budikoffer's epauletted bat from Africa, which looks almost like a dog on wings. Fruit bats spend most of their days in trees and other roosts, spending their time hanging upside down, flapping their wings to cool themselves off, and occasionally climb around the branches with their feet. They rest there during the daytime, but at night they get ready to go out and fly around and find fruit in the dark. They fly long distances to find their fruit or flower food, and then come back in the morning to their roosting trees. So what are bats related to? About 20 years ago, molecular biology showed quite clearly that they were not related to primates as once thought, but are actually closely related to insectivorous mammals like hedgehogs, shrews, and moles. This makes sense, since many of them are dedicated insectivores. So what does the fossil record say about the origin of bats? Unfortunately, because bats have very fragile, very thin skeletons, it's all or nothing. Usually you only get tooth fossils, like we do in the late Paleocene and early Eocene, which give us very little to go on other than the teeth. However, there are deposits like the Green River Shale that's 52 million years old, which produces fossils like this, Ornithonicteris, which is known from a complete articulated skeleton, which still had claws on all of its fingers and lots of other primitive features. Another famous Green River Shale bat is Icaro-Nycteris, first described in 1966, 30 years after it was found. It's even more primitive in many ways, but does not have the claws on its fingers. The bat record in Europe is slightly better, thanks to the incredible Messel fossil deposit in western Germany at around 47 million years old. These lake shales preserve incredible body fossils that are articulated and often have fur and skin still preserved. Specimens like this Paleochiropteryx show incredible preservation of all the parts of the body. So these primitive bat fossils are not members of either the megabats or the microbats, but primitive groups that are related to them very distantly. And contrary to creationist claims they're just another bat, they have very primitive brain cases, and most of them did not echolocate, so they're not bats in the modern sense. Traditional classification of bats was a simple one, megabats and microbats. But in recent years, molecular biology has shown that certain members of the microbats are actually closely related to megabats, like Megaderma and Rhinolophus. So instead of megabats and microbats, we're now dividing them into the Inchiroptera and the Onchiroptera, which are a different group than the original classification. If this is true, then it implies that echolocation evolved first and then was lost in things like the flying foxes. The incredible diversity of 1,400 different species of bats means that there's a ton of research being done on all the different families, and molecular biology as well as morphology have been used to classify them and understand how they're related. Some are truly bizarre, with short, flat faces that have a feature used for echolocation that looks like a leaf, to long snouts. Perhaps the most famous bats of all are the vampire bats, which have fangs in the front they use to make an incision on a prey animal, and then they lap up the blood, using an anticoagulant in their saliva to deaden the feeling and also prevent the blood from clotting. They mostly feed on large animals when they're asleep, and the prey animal feels nothing and never usually has any bad effects. Occasionally, however, they do feed on blood from humans when they're asleep. This is the amazing story of bats, an important fossil group and now one of the most important groups of living mammals that is sorely underappreciated and misunderstood.